on your dining room.
So Chris and I have formulated our responses, and we thought we would tag team, but in the end we actually drafted them separately, and so we're going to read them separately. I'll start with mine first, and then Chris will read his. What a day it's been, right? What a wonderful day. And I really want to thank our speakers really for this thoughtful and stimulating day, and for accepting our invitation to consider further the topic of Dante and teaching, this time from a different perspective. We didn't articulate this at the beginning of the day, but these aren't the essays, right, that are being collected within the volume. They were asked to reflect further upon the topic on which they wrote and take it further. So it was really an experiment, and we thank them for accepting the challenge to do it and meeting and exceeding that challenge. And we also really appreciate what they did today. I know Chris joins me in this, because talking about pedagogy, talking about teaching, at least in our field, runs the risk of seeming anti-intellectual, right? And that seems kind of dangerous to us, especially in a field such as ours. But what I think that they've all shown today is that it's not the case, right? Teaching Dante demands scientific knowledge, technical skill, and also talking about our relationship with teaching often means confronting our own selves as teachers, readers, and students of Dante, and our own positionality. To the extent that this personal work, this soul craft, to adopt Ron Hertzman's phrase, begins with us as professors and individuals and continues in the classroom, is something that you heard throughout today. It is work that demands that Dantisti are self-reflective teachers and scholars in equal measure. So I would like to focus my part of the response on a theme that I found ran through all of the papers today. It sounds a bit depressing, I probably hope it's not. It's the function of deficiency or lack in our role as readers and teachers of Dante. So I'm not referencing an inferiority complex or academic imposter syndrome here. No one could probably take that further. What I mean to talk about is a sense of what is missing in the sense of mancanza referred to by Sherry Rausch earlier, either emotionally or cognitively in learning or professing Dante. We had this introduced to us this morning by Teo Barolini, who showed us clearly how Dante, as the self-appointed teacher of his textual world, makes decisions that require the presence of a teacher or commentator, one who can serve as a guide, but like Virgil is limited and still reckoning, right, with their own questions of the poem. As she showed us, we decide how to deal with this upside-down pedagogy, to use her phrase. Do we accept his inversion of the, quote, normative communication flow in presenting information to his reader, as she writes, in order to let our students learn with the pilgrim, what she calls the naive voyager paradigm? Or do we go against the grain and partially resolve the continuous cognitive deficit that the poet orchestrates, for example, by sharing the information from Inferno 11, the Aristotelian structure of hell itself, or what the reader eventually grasps from Purgatory 16, that the entire afterlife is built upon the idea of free will? And I'm sure you can think of other moments as well. Berolini's talk today made me reflect personally upon the timing and quantity of that information as I impart it to my students, and whether or not I am participating in Dante's dramatization of the afterlife, or if I'm sufficiently asking my students to imagine reality, as we were asked to do for Paradiso. In regards to her statement that Dante, quote, avoids telling in favor of showing, I wonder what it would mean practically in the classroom to demonstrate more than to explicate. Would the gaps in explication lead to an even greater appreciation for the complexity of the poem, since it would then closely align our student with the pilgrim? Dante's Virgil teaches us that the limitations and departure of the guide or the teacher occur repeatedly at specific points along the journey. When do we let go of predetermined objectives, as Sherry Rausch has provocatively asked us, and embrace our own pedagogical failures? As Rausch spoke today, as she writes, quote, no human individual has the central right of place, unquote. Yet we are teaching a poem that does nothing but measure human actions against each other in what she calls his creative ethical imperative. How do we let go of our imperfections when Dante, as judge and artificer, holds on so tightly? The balance between embracing our lack of understanding and applying a surgical knife to the matter of the poem is mirrored, as Rausch conveys, by Dante himself. That is the gift of lack, the inspiration of Virgil's imperfections and of our own. It leads us and our students to something greater. As Rausch writes, Virgil's Mancanza is Dante the Pilgrim's invitation to go beyond. Dante the poet's Mancanza in Paradiso 33 is our invitation to go beyond in our own contexts. This is beautifully illustrated as well by Jessica Levenstein's talk today, where she describes the process of bringing students to a set chronological point from which they can go beyond. I have a new appreciation for, and I'm sure you all do, for how the high school graduation experience and leaving the nest mirrors the pilgrim's own fraught desire for independence. As my own teacher, Berlini, once explained, as Virgil's efficacy as a guide diminishes, our affective relationship, our emotive relationship with him increases, very much like an adolescent craving that self-individuation but not wanting to let that relationship end. The function of the poem as an imperfect mirror against which that student can measure themselves as they craft their identity in a crucial moment of their lives is also another consideration that Levenstein's essay raises for us, in addition to the transformations along the way that occur for both reader and pilgrim across the educational time of the text. Finally, her suggestion that we consider how we, as Virgils ourselves, bear the loss of separation, of having used our ingenuine arte to bring our students to this point, is one that we implicitly know, but I think rarely articulate. What does it mean when our teachers of Dante, and of course I'm not here talking about my own teachers, of course, but those predecessors upon whose work we have drawn so much, have revealed their mancanza in their own soul craft? This is the lesson of Peter Hawkins' piece as well, in his points about Singleton, and also in Gary Chestaro's essay in his parsing of Rauschenberg. Their contributions raise more questions. How many of our identities do we bring into the Dante classroom? How do we judge other instructors who make those personal identities a lens through which they read and teach the poem? How much do we self-fashion in an attempt to create a larger rhetoric that suits our Virgilian personae? Are we simply aping our poet in his constructions of authority, as many in this room have shown us? How much of what we do in the classroom is in good or bad faith? If we understand faith here to be the authentic representations of ourselves to those students whose lives we purport to change, as Peter underlined for us. Teaching Dante is a reckoning with our own imperfections over and over, and I would argue the imperfections as well as the poet, as we discussed today. And on a personal note, I just finished teaching a course on Purgatorio to a group of lifelong learners, one of my few adventures in outreach. Earlier this semester, it was also in a nursing home as well, which had a certain sense of urgency, and I felt certainly like I needed to be the perfect teacher of Dante there. But in this particular course, I'm teaching Purgatorio to these lifelong learners. It was very unique. Never before have I had a group that was so collectively disappointed in the poet for a laundry list of reasons. For his treatment of Virgil, most of all for his treatment of women, and so forth. And I try to pride myself on teaching Dante and women. Never before have I seen so many people shake their heads at Dante, and I found myself disturbed, defending him left and right, as if my teaching self depended upon it. I found myself in the situation to which Gary Chestaro alluded earlier, when he writes, "No one quite escapes the confessional risk no matter how strenuous the historical, philosophical, or philological maneuvering. At a certain point, I realized that I was going about it the wrong way. My Dante is, and may never be, their Dante. As Martin Eisner wrote today, it is by finally letting go of the worry and accepting the ways in which Dante's various projects are bold and disquieting that we teach in good faith and authentically. It is by acknowledging these imperfections in the poet and ourselves as the fruitful moments that lead our students beyond. It is accepting that once Virgil leaves, our student pilgrims will continue their education with someone greater than ourselves, perhaps. We all can do our best to be Virgil, the sweet pedagogue, and only rarely can we strive to be Beatrice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristina. And I join Kristina in thanking all of our speakers today for their fine talks. It's been talked about several times today, but these are part of the volume that Kristina and I are editing for the MLA, and we've been doing that for probably longer than too many years, more years than we can count, probably, at least on one hand. In other words, but one of the things that has always disturbed me about the way the MLA is referring to our book is they keep calling it a second edition of Carol Slade's 1982 book. They don't mention it by name, but by calling it a second edition, it seems to be that we're simply updating it. This is a completely new work. None of the, or very few of the titles that were listed in the bibliography for Carol Slade's book are present in ours. And so I've written the MLA saying it's volume 2. It's not a second edition. So today we have 30 contributors to the volume, and 7 of them performed today. In preparing for this project for the MLA, we received about 100 different questionnaires, detailed responses to the questionnaire that the MLA put out. And all of these tend to attest to the poem's continuing popularity and to Dante's continuing presence in and importance to the contemporary academic curriculum. Our contributors, including the speakers here today, have generously shared their experience in teaching the comedy and provide a wonderfully rich and expansive vision on how Dante is read, interpreted, taught, and appreciated in the 21st century. Now, I would imagine that all of us here today are grateful for the opportunity and privilege to teach Dante, not least because it is, or at least it was for me while I was still teaching, the one class that almost never fails to live up to our expectations, to reward our efforts, and yes, occasionally to surprise us, both positively and negatively. Of course, there are always challenges. Attempting to respond to those unexpected questions that students often ask, making a case for Dante's continuing relevance in today's world, or perhaps trying to explain why he wears that silly hat. However, the satisfactions that we experience are many. We note with pleasure that when our students experience an epiphanic moment, we share their sadness over Virgil's disappearance in purgatory. I'm reminded of that tale this morning's talk about Jonathan Combs Schilling weeping over Virgil's departure. I also remember that Professor John McGalliard, who used to teach at the University of Iowa, who after his retirement moved to Madison. This was something that I could fits into something I'll say later on. John McGalliard had studied with Grandgent at Harvard and was sort of my link to that particular past. But he said that every time that he taught that passage too, his voice cracked and he saw tears coming from some of his students' eyes. So it's something which is sort of transgenerational. In other words, the notion of the anguish that one experiences or could experience when Virgil leaves. We also observe our students' reaction to the dark, diabolical humor in the volley of the veriters and the flatterers, or we join with them in quiet contemplation of the ineffable mystery that closes Paradise 33. We appreciate these and many other moments over the course of a semester or a year, for in them we find confirmation of our dedication to the centuries-long tradition of teaching the comedy. And yes, we generally enjoy every moment of every class. In fact, after hearing the papers today, I often wish I could be back in the classroom to do it again, just for that rush that it gives you. Now, this morning, Teo gave us a rich overview of the various ways that Dante teaches us how to read and understand his poem. And the presenters, 6 presenters, have enriched our minds with their own papers. For me, the important lesson is that Dante is both teacher and student. After all, in Paradise 24 to 26, he passed the test of the theological virtues. And we understand that he considered teaching and learning as a dynamic and collaborative enterprise, one involving many individuals and disciplines. Dante had many teachers, both ancient and contemporary, with whom he interacted and learned. Dante had and has many students and teachers who by 2018 number in the millions. So when we read and teach the comedy today, we are participating in a time-honored, multifaceted, and labor-intensive journey that holds rich rewards for all of us, colleagues and students alike. We do not teach in a vacuum. In addition to recognizing Dante's primacy as a mentor on our journey as teachers through the poem, we learn from the experiences and wisdom of others, as we have done today. We benefit from the classroom interaction with our students, just as we learn new things from scholarly publications, public lectures, and conferences. We recognize how various intellectual and cultural traditions, literary, historical, philosophical, artistic, and so on, help shape Dante's vision and function as his teachers. And we, following his example, must take account of these lessons from the past, integrate and rationalize them with our current knowledge, and thus provide our students with the preparation they need to continue the grand tradition. We remember the verses in Paradise 10, where Dante, as teacher and author, addresses us, his readers and students, or Tidi Mandato Sobre to Alamco. Stay on your bench now, reader, thinking of the joy you have but tasted. If well before you tire, you would be happy. I have set your table. From here on, feed yourself, for my attention now resides in that matter of which I have become a scribe. Dante's great intellectual banquet is ours to taste, consume, and enjoy. And we are responsible for passing it on to future generations for their nourishment and enrichment, thus serving as vital links in this long tradition. Tradition is important to Dante, as I mentioned, just as it is important to the centuries-long discipline of Dante studies, and just as it should be to all of us as well. We remember our teachers and the lessons we learn both inside and outside the classroom. However, we must not be so overwhelmed by our illustrious forebears, thinking about Peter Hawkins right now, talking about Singleton in a way. We should not be so overwhelmed by our illustrious forebears that we consider ourselves to be like those dwarfs who, as Bernard of Chartres so aptly put it, sat on the shoulders of giants. No, we are not those dwarfs. Indeed, we could adapt the phrase from manuscript studies and textual criticism, recensiones non deteriores, to describe the fact that while our views and interpretations may be more recent, they are no less valid, simply because of their more modern status. They are not worth less. Balancing the old and the new is a difficult but necessary task. In short, we should view the research on and the teaching of Dante to be two sides of the same coin, both directed toward the same end. And their interaction can lead to remarkable results in both areas. We are fortunate to be living in a period of intense activity and productivity with regard to Dante and his works in general. And this is due in large part to the energy, vision, and expertise of our many dedicated colleagues, both those here today and around the world. In conclusion, my response to the papers presented in this symposium is very simple. Thank you. Thank you for the insights you have shared with us today. Thank you for your good work, past, present, and future. in research, in the classroom, and in the public forum, as we'll see more with Dante on demand, Dante on the call, dialing for Dante, whatever.
So,
Has anyone seen that cartoon, dialing for Dante? I'll send it out on the internet, it's quite interesting.
well,
Dante's Hope, announced in Paradise 25, Se mai continua che il poema sacro, etc. Dante's Hope, of course, remained unfulfilled in his lifetime, for the comedy did not overcome the crudeltà that kept him both outside the bello vile and without the laurel crown. Nevertheless, today Dante would be content knowing that his many readers and students over the centuries have guaranteed his continuing salutary presence in the world. And this knowledge will allay his great fear expressed in Paradise 17, that he would perder vivere tra coloro che questo tempo chiameranno antico. In a wide variety of languages and settings, academic and not, Dante's voice as poet and pilgrim in the comedy continues to be heard throughout the world. And this is a tribute to you and to all of his many readers, teachers, and students. Thank you. Are there any other further comments, responses? You must have some responses. Yes.
Yeah, I have a response. I guess my response I heard today is that I heard surprisingly little about Dante as a learner himself and the context of teaching that is implicit in the right comedy that then supports his claim to be a teacher. I just wondered if people had any thoughts on that. I think that the difference between Dante and Petrarch gets granted officially magisterium. I was just looking at the privilegium here. It says he may teach poetic and historical arts and all other such arts belong to those in any place that he pleases, in any manner that he shall so choose, interpreting books old and new. So, Petrarch's got a little cheeky to be unless that Madison. I guess what it is then.
I would just like to say that, if I recall correctly, a number of people did actually talk about Dante as a learner, at least as a character in the poem, if not as a poet outright, although in that sense he was obviously a learner. Someone was talking about Dante's Mancanze and how those become instructive regarding our own Mancanze and those of our students and how those are convertible to wealth.
But that's the abstract and timeless element, which I think is great.
I think the one answer to that question, you say Dante is a learner, which also involves what did he read, what did he know, what books were available to him.
Yes.
What was teaching like?
Excuse me? What was teaching like?
What was teaching like?
What was his experience?
These are things that have been dealt with in part and are being dealt with in research that certain scholars are doing these days in terms of what was actually done to reading, what books were available to him in Florence at the time. One of my students in the NEH, with great admiration for Ron, for Bill Cook. There were many NEH summer seminars. I did one. Very clever. So I'm 5% of what Ron did. In any event, one of them was doing research. Her project was to look at what books would have been available in the Florence libraries that we have now that would have been done at that time. It's still a work in progress. I think with Madison and Olson, he's also working, I think, on that. What Dante would have known at the time. So that's part of the equation. I can't speak to the other part. Paul Gale, in his book
abstract ideal that I feel like maybe we need to find more bridges.
It's been a very good day. Thank you all for coming. Ask for one more round of applause. I think that many people have contributed to an extraordinarily good day, but I think that Christian DuPont probably deserves and I think he's off preparing a reception for us, so let's go.
What's the video?
What? No, okay, well, anyway, no, that's it.